Hi, and welcome back to the Export Impact Podcast, brought to you by Export Development Canada, EDC. I'm Bruce Croxon, and I'm the host of this podcast. On today's episode, we're speaking with an inspiring entrepreneur who's making waves in sustainability and water treatment innovation. Amielle Lake is co-founder and chief commercial officer of CarboNet, an advanced materials company dedicated to replacing harmful chemicals in wastewater treatment. With her extensive experience in entrepreneurship, including founding and selling a software company, Amielle has brought transformative leadership to CarboNet, helping it disrupt entrenched industry practices while advancing sustainability goals. Today, she'll share insights about CarboNet's journey, the challenges of scaling globally, and the critical role that Export Development Canada has played in supporting the company's growth. I'd like to begin today's episode by acknowledging that we're recording from my office in Toronto, which is on the traditional unceded territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We value taking this moment to deepen the appreciation of our Indigenous communities, wherever we are, and remind ourselves of our shared debt to Canada's First Peoples. Welcome to the podcast, Amielle. We're delighted to have you with us today. And I want to just start by hearing a bit more about CarboNet. I went on the website and was just like, right in my face was CarboNet chemistry lowers CapEx, OpEx, and emissions. So as a fellow entrepreneur, that always got me, pretty excited to see that and potential impact on the P&L. But how do you do that? Tell us how the company and the technology works.
Sure. So why don't I start with the origin story of CarboNet? Because I think that'll give you some indication as to how exciting we think the technology is. And yes, how it does really lend a hand to transforming a pretty important industry, which is water. So the story of CarboNet. I'd sold my software company and I was at UBC, University of British Columbia, which something for Canadians to be very proud of. We're a globally ranked institution. And like many of our universities in Canada, we have an incubator program. The one at UBC is called E at UBC. And after I sold my company, I was invited by a fellow by the name of Barry Yates, who is also the CEO of CarboNet. So I'll share more about that in a second, to become an entrepreneur in residence. And effectively, that's a role where you go and meet with wannabe entrepreneurs from the university, and you try and share all the mistakes you made in the hopes that they don't make the same ones you did and effectively help them. So it was during the time at UBC where I met Dr. Michael Carlson, and he is the inventor and one of my business partners and the CTO of CarboNet. He is a wonderful person, and he made a discovery that we think has huge potential. So let me tell you what happened. Mike was doing his PhD in biochemistry. And very specifically, he was working in the drug delivery arena. And if you can imagine, drug delivery, when you're looking at chemistry, involves tremendous precision. It was right around the time that he was doing this work that they started publishing the nefarious effects of using detergents to try and clean up offshore oil spills. And basically what happened is when they would apply detergents, or just think of it as a chemical, to clean up offshore oil spills, it would break everything down into nano-sized particles and it poisoned the aquatic life below. So Mike was watching this go on the news, and he was yelling at the screen, and he said, I'm going to go back to the lab and crack the case. And it's kind of a good news, bad news story. I'd say mostly good news. Bad news is we can't treat an offshore open spill with the technology that Mike invented, but we can develop very effective, very cost-effective, very easy to apply, and very green chemistries to wastewater treatment. And the reason we're able to do that is we're able to design molecules and control them with tremendous precision. So you sort of have that double back to the drug delivery world, but we're applying it to wastewater. And it's a sea change in how anyone's ever thought about wastewater treatment.
No, interesting. That's fascinating how, some of the best ideas come out of happenstance and wasn't really what you were targeting to do, but you've ended up there. I've noticed you do talk a lot on your LinkedIn and the different things you communicate about is really the quality of water at large you talk about. And, we could unknowingly be drinking water that has been contaminated with all kinds of things and we don't know about it. But how do you narrow down the wide spectrum of water quality? Because it is absolutely a global issue and it's a critical resource. And Canada is very well versed to be leading the way in it, given how much of it we have. But how did you narrow down from that wide spectrum down to treating of wastewater? Because every idea requires focus. You can't boil the ocean. So, how did that journey happen? And what made you focus in on that? And maybe talk a little bit about how easy or hard it is to target that.
So, yeah, focus is probably the most important word for an entrepreneur. If you don't focus, it's very hard to succeed.
And you're tackling a huge problem, right? Like, I mean, it would be so tempting not to be focused in a sense, right?
Oh, yeah. And the technology can do so much. So that was the other challenge. It is a platform technology where we can design these molecules to target so many different issues in wastewater. So obviously, the big question is, where do you start? And how do you build the business as quickly as possible? And so what we did is we did a lot of customer discovery and we looked at the potential of our chemistry in terms of commercializing it quickly versus, spending a lot of time in R&D, often an issue that scientists or deep tech companies need to balance. And we also looked at the pain and the buying behavior of target customers and obviously marrying those two up, the potential of the technology and the openness and need of the market. And we looked at municipalities, we looked at all kinds of things, and we finally arrived at oil and gas. And the reason is that in oil and gas, and very specifically hydraulic fracturing or fracking, they use a lot of water. Water is a crazy problem. It is very expensive, and they need a cost-effective and operationally efficient solution to treat that water so they can recycle it. And so we basically went down to the Permian Basin, and there's a lot of stories within this overview. So I'll just kind of give you the quick overview. I'm happy to dive into it. But here is a Canadian company, and we went down to the Permian Basin. We took our chemistry, we tuned it to address the issues of treating produced water. That's the water that comes out of fracking. And we were able to take over the market for the chemistries that we compete against for produced water reuse within 18 months. We are the largest provider. Our class of chemistries is flocculants and coagulants. I won't get too technical, but we are the largest supplier of those chemistries in the Permian Basin, which is effectively the largest operating oil field in the world.
So you went right for the mega hit right out of the gate. It's funny, right? Because I'm used to dealing with, as a Canadian entrepreneur, I'm used to dealing with an ecosystem that, they start with the Canadian market, get some product market fit, get some success, get funded up, turn their eye to international markets second in sort of phase 2 or 3. And then, obviously we're looking to back global companies, but it sounds like you guys went right for the mother lode. I mean, was there anything behind, a small Canadian startup saying, you know what, let's jump off right away and go after the US market? Was it simply a matter of that's where the biggest opportunity was, or were there some circumstances that led you there?
No, it's a great question. So, I mean, one is it came down to blood spurting pain. And two, we had a network where we were able to go after the air quotes mother lode. We had spent time talking to Canadian oil and gas CEOs, and fracking is in smaller volumes, and the treatment of fracking water is even smaller. So yes, we could have done, proof of concepts there, but the appetite and the blood spurting pain, like that tourniquet for blood shooting out of your neck, the business problem we all want to try and solve, doesn't matter the market, was really evident to us in the Permian after we went down and spent quite a bit of time talking to operators. And there's this class of companies that treat the water called midstream. And we actually, I'd love to share with you kind of a funny story of how we got started in Texas. So we basically formulated the first version of our product in a wooden box. And that's because we didn't have a fume hood. Okay, we do now. And we had about 500 mils of this stuff. And we bought plane tickets and we flew down to Houston. And through connections, we were able to meet with this individual who's wonderful, our SVP of field operations, Jack Legford. We were able to meet with him. Now, he has a lot of experience in the oil field. He's also a former Top Gun instructor. So, of course, you can imagine, just as a sidebar, when Top Gun came out, we made a big deal about it.
Maybe a little bit of type A mixed into his personality.
Yeah, very mission driven.
Okay.
Very mission driven. So we spoke to him. We said, listen, we need some produced water to see if if our magic stuff here works. And he said, okay, I'm going to get some and I'm going to meet you at my mother-in-law's garage. And so we thought, okay. I mean, you have to remember, we had 500 mils in a suitcase. So we met at his mother-in-law's garage and we ran a quick test and we thought, okay, this stuff really works. We knew we had something that was special. We knew we could do it cheaper than the competition. We knew we could solve a lot of their operational issues. So kind of first through the combination of customer discovery and then that magical moment in a very hot garage. This was in July, by the way, in Houston. We realized we had not just that market pain, but we had a solution that would address it.
Amazing. That's sort of like that aha moment where we've got something here. That would that have been 6, 7 years ago, 5 years ago? What just sort of put us in that spot?
Yeah, no, it was 6 years ago. And of course, we went through COVID. And anyways, lots of stories on that journey.
Well, and I got to ask, as we're recording this, we are at a time, and when this comes out, maybe that time will be different. But as we sit here right now, we are going head to head with our biggest trading partner around things like tariffs and some of the environmental best practice that we took for granted under past administrations may be coming under threat. As any of this sort of, particularly as we're talking about fracking and our global desire to make fracking more environmentally friendly, are you concerned at all about any shifting tides with the current political environment?
There's absolutely shifting tides. I think for CarboNet, there are going to be some pretty exciting benefits, and then there are going to be challenges we have to work through. So yes, we are impacted by tariffs, but the market opportunity because of the desire to manufacture more, just any manufacturing. So we're in other markets beyond just oil and gas. We do food processing, construction, municipal work now as well. So that's only going to grow the need to treat water, whether it's south of the border or in Canada. The US is just a larger market. We are, a Canadian and a US company. So I think CarboNet is going to definitely have some benefits, even some economic ones where we can outcompete. And we're going to also have to manage through the tariffs. And we're just working through what that looks like right now. And we don't have a lot of clarity, but we've got some cautious optimism despite everything that's happening right now.
Yeah, and I was more sort of referring to the priority of the environment, depending on who's running the show. And you have to take comfort as you're on this sort of mission while growing a business that it's all lining up for the greater good, right? Who doesn't want to address the wastewater issue? Like it's one of those motherhood things. So listen, I mean, you're no stranger, obviously, to growing outside your own border. So EDC, you have partnered with along the way. How have they supported you? Can you give our listeners a view on some of the services that might be available to them that you've taken advantage of as you've leveraged this partnership to grow beyond the Canadian borders?
Absolutely. Could I just make one quick comment on wastewater and perhaps why that differs from a business environmental perspective than
Please,
something
yeah.
like carbon emissions? Because I
Yep.
think it'll provide a lot of context for listeners. So when we got into this space, we were shocked by the lethargy of the investment community because we think and we see it. I mean, we're out of water, period, full stop. I mean, there are going to be states that no longer offer construction permits. You won't be able to have an electric vehicle, much less have, oil to run your car. Everything involves water. and it's a cost. So it's becoming a boardroom issue. So, yes, the environment is critical, but society will not function without water in its processes. And we've got a solution that makes it cheaper and greener. So we're aligned. I guess what I'm trying to say is we're kind of aligned with no matter where, like if regulations change, it's still a cheaper alternative for a manufacturer. They're only going to manufacture more. And hence, there's going to be a need to treat the water. So we're quite excited about the water treatment industry as a whole. And certainly increased regulations will help. But even if nothing changes or they even get lowered, they have to do it for economic reasons and just sheer requirements.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for clarifying that. It's almost like the environmental benefit that I was going on about is a secondary benefit that we're not, don't have this constant drain on the little remaining natural resource we have left.
I mean, it's key. Yes. And we absolutely need to manage it. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for that.
So, yeah, EDC, we love. We've dealt with EDC across, I guess, a few of their programs because we're an exporter. They insure all our very precious AR, which is obviously quite key to building and managing a company like ours. We've been part of some fabulous commercial connection programs that they have. They made some excellent introductions for us on the commercial front. And I just would love for them to have more because they've been so valuable. And then we have also, although we've never inked a deal, we've talked to them quite a bit on the financing side. And, we've dealt obviously with a number of VCs. We actually have very little VC capital in the company, but we did go through various exercises and exploring term sheets and all that. And the EDC group was wonderfully aggressive. Like we really appreciated that. They did everything they said they were going to do on timelines and yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just a when, not an if we partner with other parts of their organization, particularly on the capital side.
Yeah. And as a venture capitalist who is in a number of companies with the EDC, I echo what you're saying. They've been exceptional partners on a number of ventures that I've been involved in. So you're speaking truth here. I hope you end up doing something together because they've really been supportive partners on the deals that we've been involved in.
Yeah, they are.
What would you say are some of the key challenges you've faced in scaling the company, and how have you addressed them? I mean, you didn't start out life as an entrepreneur, but you've had a lot of years of actually growing and scaling and selling. Are there ones that are unique to CarboNet, some of the challenges you faced, and maybe help our entrepreneur audience largely talking a little bit on how you would have addressed those challenges?
It's a great question, Bruce. So, I mean, the first one's probably the more popular one for entrepreneurs to say, which is access to capital. We have capitalized the business and we've done it fairly successfully. However, it has been difficult. As I mentioned earlier, there's been this lethargy, or it's not on trend to look at water, although we think water is going to be the biggest investment issue or opportunity in the next decade. And so certainly finding investors and also kind of creating a structure that makes sense for everyone, both the founders and kind of ensuing rounds of investors, like all of that was quite challenging. So that's kind of thing one. You can imagine we went from 500 mils in that wooden box. Then we bought pots from Walmart and mixed the chemical ourselves to now we have 2 facilities and we're looking to add several more over the coming years.
And it's capital intensive, I've got to assume. Like we're not talking about 2 garages here and scaling by mixing with Walmart pots and pans. Like this is real capital.
Yes, exactly. And so the cash to cash cycles from raw materials to deploying with a customer to having them pay you to investing in scaling up for capacity. I mean, those are very tricky spots that we have to manage through. So that's definitely been our biggest issue. The second one is, it is also a popular one for Canadians to say, is access to marketing and sales talent. Being a Canadian company and one in Vancouver, which as you can imagine is several flights away typically from the manufacturing centers, whether it's in the agricultural space or large municipalities or of course the oil field. We are kind of this outpost. And so, of course, we're building our teams in the locations that make sense. And it is challenging to find really good talent. That's just something that Canadian entrepreneurs have largely always struggled. It's not to say there isn't lots of talent, but it's really just finding those people and making those connections. And then, of course, bringing them on your team.
It's really interesting as I hear you say that. I go back to the COVID period when we sort of had this movement towards being able to work remotely, and it didn't really matter where the talent came from. I would imagine in what you do that face to face and being in front of the customer and being on the ground is a little bit more important than some of the software companies you might have had exposure to in the past.
It is. And the reason for that is trust and credibility. I mean, you can imagine when we first went down there, we were basically 4 Canadian bumpkins, as far as, the West Texas oil field was concerned. And we were saying, hey, we have something and please give us a try. So we had to do some pretty innovative things. Of course, we spent a lot of time developing relationships for them to give us a shot. And then, you think about wastewater, you are on site, you are proving live in front of someone that you're able to address their issues. So yes, face-to-face is critical.
Amazing. Listen, just last question. You've advised a number of Canadian entrepreneurs in your career. And I also notice it, and feel free if you want to give a mention or a shout out to Women's Equity Lab, fantastic organization from what I've heard and very supportive of entrepreneurship in Canada. But what advice would you have for Canadian entrepreneurs aiming to scale their business internationally that are looking to go outside of our borders?
No, absolutely. So thank you for the shout out to the Women's Equity Lab. Yes, I agree. It's an important initiative. More women on the cap table. But yeah, my advice for entrepreneurs is listen, if you have something that solves a really important problem, and it's not just your opinion, you need the market to validate that, then I say double down and build the relationships you need to be able to get your product into the markets where it matters most. It is a grind. We were kind of joking about hustling before we opened up the podcast. And I think there's sort of this mentality in Canada of play not to lose versus play to win. So my advice to these Canadian entrepreneurs is play to win, go for it, and use the resources you can and get out there.
Yeah. I mean, listen, as I hear your story, it very much feels like that is exactly what you guys are doing. So I wish you all the best luck in the world and intentions. Not only is it a great business, but it sounds like a very worthy business. And I want to thank you for sharing your story, the insights, and the inspiring work happening at CarboNet. It's been a pleasure having you on the show and learning from your experiences. It's been very helpful.
Bruce, thank you so much. And again, a big thank you to EDC. I'm actually a fan of both, so I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today on the Export Impact Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. Until next time,